Your phone rings, and instead of answering, your chest tightens. Not because you don't care about the person calling, but because something about that ringing feels like an ambush. You stare at the screen. You wait for it to stop. And then, almost immediately, you text back, "Hey, what's up?" And somehow that feels completely fine. If you've ever done this and wondered what's wrong with you, stay here, because psychology has a very different answer than the one you've been telling yourself. Most people assume that avoiding calls means you're anxious or distant, or that you just don't care enough to make the effort. But research in cognitive and personality psychology tells a completely different story. You're not avoidant, you're not cold, you're not bad at relationships. You process communication differently, and that difference has more to do with how your brain is wired than with how much you care. Here's the first thing research tells us about people who prefer texting. Their brains are doing more, not less. Cognitive load theory, developed by educational psychologist John Sweller, explains that our working memory can only handle so much information at once. During a phone call, your brain is simultaneously processing tone of voice, choosing words in real time, managing silences, tracking the other person's emotional state, and formulating responses, all without a pause button. That's an enormous cognitive load happening invisibly. Texting removes several of those layers. It gives your brain room to think, to choose, to refine. Think of it like this. A phone call is improv theater. You're performing live, no script, no edits, and the audience is reacting in real time. Texting is more like writing a short letter. You get to pause, reread, adjust the tone before you send it. Neither is better, but one of them allows a certain kind of brain to function at it. See best. And if you've ever hung up a call and immediately thought of the perfect thing you should have said, that's not a flaw. That's your brain telling you it needed a few more seconds to do what it does really well. You're not slow, you're thorough, and there's nothing wrong with that. Then there's a layer most people never even consider: the sound itself. Psychologist Elaine Aron's research on sensory processing sensitivity shows that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes sensory input more deeply than average. For these individuals, a phone ringing in a quiet room doesn't just get their attention, it can feel almost startling. Like a fire alarm going off in a library. It's not drama, it's neurology. The unpredictability of a call, not knowing who's calling, what they want, how long it will take, creates a small spike of cortisol, a stress response. And it's not because you're fragile. It's because your system is finely tuned. You pick up on subtleties in tone that others miss. You hear the tension behind someone's "I'm fine." You notice the pause that means something is wrong. That sensitivity is a gift in close relationships, but it also means that unscheduled, real-time voice interaction can feel like a lot, because for you, it genuinely is. You're not overreacting. Your nervous system is just processing at a higher resolution, and the people who matter will understand that a text from you carries just as much warmth as a call, sometimes even more, because you chose every single word. Have you ever said something on a call and immediately wished you could take it back? Not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't quite right? This connects to what researchers call the production effect, the way the act of producing language shapes how we think and feel about what we've said. In spoken conversation, words leave your mouth before your internal editor has finished reviewing them. In text, you get a buffer, a chance to shape meaning before it reaches someone else. It's like the difference between sculpting clay and throwing paint at a wall. Both are creative, but one gives you control over the final shape. For people who value emotional precision, who care deeply about being understood correctly, texting isn't the lazy option. It's the careful one. 32-year-old Priya, a software developer in Melbourne, once described it perfectly. She said calling feels like being put on the spot in a meeting, while texting feels like being handed a notebook and told to take her time. Same message, same intention, completely different experience. If you relate to that, if you've ever rewritten a text 3 times before sending it, not out of anxiety, but out of care, that's not overthinking. That's emotional craftsmanship. And the people who receive those messages, they're getting the most considered version of your thoughts. There's a reason a phone call can feel like someone just walked into your room without knocking. Self-determination theory, developed by psychologists Edward Deci and Har. Eichert Ryan identifies autonomy as one of our 3 core psychological needs, alongside competence and connection. When someone calls without warning, they're essentially setting the tempo of your next 5, 10, maybe 30 minutes. You didn't choose the timing, you didn't choose the topic, and you can't easily say, actually, now isn't great. Because the social pressure is already there. Live in real time. Texting restores that sense of agency. You respond when you're ready. You take the conversation at your pace. You stay in control of your own bandwidth. That's not avoidance. That's self-awareness. And here's something worth noting. This need for autonomy doesn't mean you care less about connection. In fact, research suggests the opposite. People who protect their autonomy tend to show up more fully when they do engage, because they're not running on fumes. They're not resentfully picking up the phone out of obligation. They're choosing to connect, on their terms, with intention. Compare that to someone who answers every call but is mentally checked out for half of them. Who's really more present? Wanting control over when and how you communicate isn't selfish. It's one of the most psychologically healthy things you can do. Picture your social energy like a phone battery, except no one else can see your percentage. You might be at 12% after a long workday, and someone calls wanting a 45-minute conversation. You're not unwilling, you're depleted. This connects to optimal arousal theory, which suggests each person has an ideal level of stimulation. Go below it and you feel bored. Go above it and you feel overwhelmed. For many text preferers, phone calls push past that threshold faster than other forms of communication, because they demand constant, unbroken social output with no room to pause or recharge between thoughts. Texting, on the other hand, lets you participate in a conversation while still managing your internal resources. You can respond thoughtfully between tasks. You can take a breath between messages. You can stay connected without being consumed. 27-year-old Daisuke, a graphic designer in Osaka, once told a friend, "I don't avoid you. I avoid running out of energy before I get to you." That distinction matters, because the guilt text preferers carry. That feeling of, "I should just call, what's wrong with me?" It often comes from measuring themselves against a standard that was never designed for their wiring. You're not lazy, you're not uncaring, you're working with a real, finite resource, and choosing to spend it wisely is not a flaw. It's intelligence. Here's the twist that surprises most people. Text preferers often build deeper relationships, not shallower ones. Psychologist James Pennebaker's research on written emotional disclosure found that people who express their feelings in writing often process emotions more deeply and form stronger emotional bonds than those who only communicate verbally. There's something about the act of writing, even a text message, that invites reflection. You think before you type. You consider the other person's perspective. You craft meaning instead of just reacting. It's the difference between a handwritten letter and a conversation shouted across a crowded room. Both reach the other person, but one carries a kind of quiet intentionality that the other simply can't. And that's what people often miss when they judge texters. They see the silence between messages and assume distance, but inside that silence is thought, consideration, care. Does that mean every text conversation is deep and meaningful? Of course not. Sometimes it's memes and grocery lists. But the capacity for depth is there, woven into the very way you choose to communicate. So no, preferring text doesn't make your relationships shallow. It means you've found a medium that lets you be honest, thoughtful, and present in the way that feels most natural to you. Depth doesn't require volume. It never did. So the next time someone tells you to just pick up the phone, or makes you feel like your way of connecting is somehow less, remember what you've learned here. Your preference isn't a flaw. It's not avoidance. It's a reflection of how you think, how you feel, and how you care. And that deserves respect, especially from yourself. If this video helped you feel seen, leave a like. If you want more psychology content for people like us, subscribe.